Hello, welcome to the Flagship Monster Edition. So you're about 19 months old and you have a degree in aerodynamics with a minor in stickiness?
Yes, I take quite a lot of pride in that last one.
And where do you see yourself in 5 years?
Probably here in the exact same spot.
Ah, so you're very loyal.
You could say that.
Wonderful, wonderful. Now, what makes you think you'd be right for this job?
Well, you said you were looking for someone who is great at connecting with the hunters.
Oh, yes, you think you could manage that?
Well, I'm connecting with you right now, aren't I?
Ladies, gentlemen, and monsters of all ages, as the time winds down before Iceborne's release, we get closer and closer to having our greedy little hands on its fantastic new mechanics and new locations, but more than any of that, what truly matters most is the monsters. The new goddamn monsters! A flagship monster is the poster child of each game, the one put on the cover to really try to entice people to pick that game up off the shelf and buy it. So which flagships were chosen correctly? And which of all of the flagships are the best? Without further ado, here is my list of the top 5 flagship monsters in Monster Hunter.
Number 5, Rathalos.
Something magic's about to hatch. Wow, a cute baby dragon. Watch them flap their wings and hop as they try to fly. Pet them and they make cute sounds.
The king of the sky, the final of fantasies, the smasher of bros. Rathalos is so much more than just a monster to this series. He isn't just the flagship of the original Monster Hunter game, he is the flagship of Monster Hunter as a whole. And it would be an absolute shame to not have him somewhere on this list. Though regardless of all the clout he has, when you look at him alone in a vacuum, he's an absolutely fantastic monster as well. Compared to modern day monsters with their flaming sword tails and a fluvial symbiosis, Rathalos can seem a little bit simple. After all, he has been in the series for over 15 years now. He is such an OG that his literal title is the Fire Wyvern. The Fire Wyvern. And we have seen him so many times now over the years that he is less like a foe that we judge the game design of, and more of an old friend that it's just nice to see sometimes. But when you actually stop and have a look at him, it is easy to see why he has been placed in the position he is. On a number of levels, his fight is simple, sure, but that also makes him really approachable. While his patterns may take time to learn, you don't have to work out any unusual mechanics really, just a fight between the hunter and a relatively classic fantasy dragon with the addition of some poisonous talons. Between his beautiful balls, man, this would be an awkward place to interrupt this sentence, of fire and his undeniable air control, he is constantly a surprising, memorable, and engaging fight for new hunters to deal with, even if those of us with thousands of hours might forget just how wonderful he actually is.
Number 4, Sonoda.
I like bugs. I like bugs. And they're crawly, but they're really lots of fun.
When it comes to monsters with an interesting biology and lore that has a marked impact on their fight, there aren't many monsters that can stand up to the big bad wolf himself.
Attention, far, far away, this is a little red alert!
As not only does he have an intricate symbiosis going on with thunderbugs, but that actually shows as a big part of his fight. And that is even before you look at how aesthetically beautiful he is or how unique his fight itself actually is. First off, yeah, I know, a lot of people think his color scheme could be a touch better, and while I'm not against it necessarily, I do think that he would look way cooler if his scales were, say, as white as his fur. Just make him pale as hell and then the lightning would really pop on his skin. But let's be honest, this good boy still looks fantastic just the way he is. His moveset though is where he really takes off into the stratosphere of greatness, as he really just throws some of the movement rules of Monster Hunter out of the window and flips around the place like a crazy man, or wolf. As the father of the Fanged Wyverns, in fact the only one to even exist in the main series before the 5th generation games, he was really given a unique set of abilities where even his hip check type move is more like a shoulder bash, unlike most of his beastly brethren. On top of this, he has a charging mechanic where occasionally he will just stand still and woo into the sky, which is actually him summoning thunderbugs, and if you hit him in the face enough while he stands still, nothing bad happens to you and it's just a free damage bit. But if you leave him be long enough, he will collect all the energy he needs and explode into one of the best looking enrages there is, topping him off and completing what I believe to be one of the most complete package monsters in the entire series.
Number 3, Mergui.
Impressive.
No matter how I feel about the design of the fights of these creatures, it would be impossible for me to pretend that I don't have some sort of bias towards Nergigante. As someone who started playing his Monster Hunter journey with Monster Hunter World, he played an extremely important part in the beginning of my time with the series, not just in the story or the cutscenes, but in terms of monsters that I spent a fair chunk of time farming and using his armor, and honestly I think he's just a fantastic monster as a whole. And on top of this, his actual role as a flagship is much more similar to Rathalos than something like Sonoda, for example. Sonoda fits the bill as an entirely unique creation and one of the more interesting creations of his generation, but Nergigante, while less unique, is arguably more integral to the identity of Monster Hunter World and maybe even Monster Hunter as a whole, now that World has captured the hearts of as many players as it has. As far as aesthetics go, there isn't too much detail to go into other than he is simply gorgeous.
He's right. Do you know that?
And as far as his fight goes, it is relatively simple, with the one actual mechanic being his spikes that you can break down for knockdowns or let grow out to let him pull off a dive bomb if you are some sort of masochistic maniac, which, by the way, is the name of my next album. And most importantly, in my opinion, his fight is absolutely learnable. His patterns are recognizable and easy to dodge if you know them, with the addition of the spike break mechanic being something you're supposed to figure out as you're also learning his regular attack patterns. It just makes for a fantastic experience, and that type of learnable experience provides the accessibility to new players that I love in a flagship. He isn't easy for someone new, but if you really put in the time fighting him, you will undoubtedly learn him and get him down eventually.
Number 2, Brachydios.
You don't want to hear about that, Vault Hunter. You want to hear about loot and packs and explosions. I'm Torg, and I'm here to ask you one question and one question only. Explosions?
Did you hear that? I think that was Josh's heart rate going up at the mention of Brachydios being on a list, but not in the number 1 spot.
What are you doing on computer?
But honestly, the decision to have Brachydios second on this list was not even remotely an easy one. In fact, I wavered back and forth a little bit on the merits of the monsters in question, and at the end of the day, I just can't justify putting Brachy in front of the one who's the real winner. That said, Brachydios is one of the best monsters in the entire series. Even if he isn't necessarily always in my overall top 10, I still consider him to be in the top 5 to 10% of monsters as a whole. His lore is fantastic, even if slime as a thing is a pretty unrealistic thing to stomach in the first place, but it's just so easy to forget that the moment you actually see him in game, and even more so when you actually fight him. Visually, he has an incredibly sleek yet imposing design, and his shape and curvature almost feels like a cross between a medieval castle and a race car, but as a monster. The contrast between the colors of his shell and the slime that stays on his body is beautiful, and the fact that it actually highlights his most dangerous areas is an amazing little thing that ties into the combat itself too. The fight then is incredibly unique, especially considering that his base shape is a simple brute wyvern, one of the most common monster categories, and past unique, it is also incredibly fun, enjoyable, and just generally super memorable. In fact, I don't think there is a single thing about Brachy that I would list as a straight up negative. Put simply, if Raging Brachydios was a flagship instead of regular Brachy, he would be number 1 on this list. After all, Raging Brachy is just the prime Brachydios, or should I say, primed Brachydios.
You blew it! You had it all and you blew it!
But even without the raging in front of his name, Brachydios still solidly takes his place on this list.
Number 1, Tigrex.
If you asked a random person on the street what monster they consider most iconic, you'd probably wind up with a ton of people asking you what the hell you're talking about. But if you didn't, in a room full of people who actually know the Monster Hunter series, Rathalos would probably be number 1, as expected, as he has been the flagship of the series as a whole for years. But the one who would walk away with the second most votes is almost undoubtedly Tigrex. I went almost 8 months between my first time playing a Monster Hunter game and my first time fighting a Tigrex, and I knew his name very well before that point. Just the name, not what he looked like, but his name is talked about so much it would be impossible to not hear it. And I still consider him to be one of my most vivid vivid memories of playing this game. The first time I fought him was just incredible. Lore-wise, he is just a high-tier predator, but visually speaking, he's a mix between, you may have guessed it, a tiger and a T-Rex. The former is a fantastic and beautiful, tenacious predator, and as I literally go by the name Cotton Dinosaur, you can probably guess my feelings on the latter. Fight-wise, Tigrex is the king of learnability. 70% of his fight can be chalked up to charges or combos involving charges, and the rest of it being a bit of biting and throwing rocks at you, and of course the other big part of his fight, his damaging roar. His terrifying, damaging roar. I love it. I love the idea of him just being so loud it hurts, and I love the way it can change how you look at a fight entirely by making you aware that you could lose a large chunk of your health with minimal warning at any moment in time. So aesthetically, he's awesome. Combat-wise, fantastic. And as far as memorability and status as a flagship, he is just slightly under the top of the crop. And all of these things considered together, with the fact that I just had this undeniable desire to fight Tigrex as much as possible, is the reason that he is in my #1 position. Alright everyone, I've been Cotton Dinosaur, and this has been my list of the top 5 flagship monsters in Monster Hunter. Do you agree with my choices? Are you upset that I bumped Nargacuga off the list to talk about Rathalos?
Whatever, motherfucker!
Like if you liked the video, subscribe and hit the notification bell for more, and most importantly, ladies and gentlemen, until next time, stay sweet. This is the brand new outro to tell you all the things that you do that we love, so let's start with something simple and say, oh, we love your eyes. When they're watching us play video games, when we make a bunch of jokes that are kinda lame, or when they gaze upon our failures as we try to kill the monsters or important news about the Kingdom Animalia. Rage, Cotton, and Hollow are all here, talking about the things you want to hear. So if you want to be the first to hear, like and subscribe and the bell and we'll cheer. Some of you are patrons even though we are all the noobs and you're the pros. There's nothing we can do to thank you. No, really, there's nothing we could possibly do. Goodbye.